Thanks. My name's Dale Ginn. I'm the managing director for Aston Minerals. It's ASX listed. ASO is the symbol. And we have a new maiden resource on a new nickel discovery we made about 15 months ago. It's quite large. We also have a maiden resource on a gold deposit called Edleston. So we'll talk a little further on that.
Dale, thank you for the introduction. Nice to meet you. You're being very modest there. Your maiden resource in your nickel is over 1 billion tons. From 15 months ago to 1 billion tons is some going.
Yeah, it was quick. I mean, that's from discovery. So we were, very aggressive in terms of our drilling. But I think it speaks to the homogeneous nature of the deposit that we were able to build tonnage as quickly as we work.
How many meters did you have to drill for that, and how many holes, and what was your total meterage roughly?
Well, we did about just under 30,000 meters of drilling in the past, say, 14 months. I can't remember the number of holes, but the average hole length, say, was 500 meters. So, you can kind of work out the meterage from there.
About 600 holes. 500 meters depth, is that because it was mineralized from surface to depth? Because when I look at your presentation, you talk about the dimensions being about 500 meters. So that sounds like quite a lot of continuous mineralization.
Yeah, well, the unit is well over 6 kilometers long, and kind of averages, say, 100 to over 500 meters thick. And we drilled it down as deep as 700 meters. So it's open at depth. The resource obviously is tighter. More of your indicated resource is within about a 2 kilometer strike length. And then the drill spacing gets further apart as you move away from that core. And that's where you're indicated. There's quite a lot of unclassified. So if you look at that model, you could see that the resource only takes in a portion of what we actually modeled as the unit.
Given that homogeneity, is the grade predictable along strike as it is down dip or with depth?
Yes.
And also down dip. You've got those 3 dimensions, go across the body, down dip, and along strike. What's the grade variation in those 3 directions like, please?
It's very, I'd say, extremely continuous down dip, and the cross sections will show that in the model. It's quite homogeneous within the tighter space drilling. So I think what it does show is that more drilling will actually help you increase the grade over the whole unit. But the other thing is to look at the grade tonnage curve, and you'll see you can go upwards towards 1.7 billion tons and not lose too much grade. So that speaks to the homogeneity of the deposit.
By dropping the cutoff down to where?
Well, on paper, the cutoff was worked out by our consultants to about 0.12% nickel, and that, on paper, that looks good. That brings the tonnage to about 1.7 billion tons. Now, we used with about 1 billion tons. We could go down to 500 million at higher grade. And those are the areas where the tonnage grade curves kind of cross, and they look to be kind of the more logical places to put your to have your resource at.
These are kind of fantastical numbers. In one of the challenges in the nickel market over time has been finding large sulphide resources that work economically. And here you are, 15 months after making a discovery, pulling out 1 billion tons of the stuff. There's quite a lot for a simple resource geologist like me, it's quite a lot for me to process. Just taking a step back, how did it start? Why in that particular part of the Canadian Shield did you say, right, that's where we're going to look?
Well, number one, we were drilling a gold deposit, and we kind of moved off the gold deposit into trying to extend it to the east. And we came across a mineralization, broad mineralization in a mafic volcanic that just didn't seem right. And it was low-grade nickel basically throughout, like a couple 100 meters of 0.2% nickel. And we were basically, that led us to chase that mineralization to the south into a true ultramafic intrusive complex. And that's the boomerang shape I'm talking about. And so we chased into the proper geology, basically. And once we were in the proper geology, the unit shows up very, very well in geophysical terms. And it was, I guess, relatively easy for us to target at that point.
Reading your news release, the three, and looking at your presentation, the three main nickel-bearing minerals are pentlandite, hazelwoodite, and millerite, which are all three of them sulfides. Do they all have a metallic luster? And when you drilled into that extension of Edleston gold, did you see that these were sulfides and think, hang on, we need to assay this, we need to sample this?
Yeah, absolutely, we did. Mainly was pyrrhotite up at the, in the golds area with the low-grade nickel after it was assayed. But as we move into proper geology, as you said, the sulfide minerals became basically pentlandite and millerite and basically high tenor nickel sulfides. And that is, I think, what is the largest differentiator for our deposit to some other low-grade nickel deposits, is that this is a truly sulfide, high tenor nickel sulfide deposit.
You've also talked about serpentinization, which is when you have these ultramafic rocks like pyridotites and dunnites, which are very high percentages of magnesium and iron in them, with these dominant minerals, olivine and pyroxene, when they get serpentinized, when they get altered by these hydrothermal fluids, serpentinite is a very clay, kind of palish green kind of clay mineral. Are you saying that, and I've seen you use the word serpentinite, is that, or serpentinization, is it that whole process, is it a whole rock alteration of these olivines and pyroxenes?
Right. And, to begin with, these intrusives would have had their nickel caught up in the olivines, and through the process of alteration, your nickel's pushed out of the olivines and into, say, low tenor sulfides like pyrrhotite. And then a further push in the alteration would upgrade the sulfide to pentlandites or millerites. And that's what's happened in our case, due to large regional faults that run right through our ultramafic intrusive unit. And so it's given it that extra boost in alteration, if you will, that's basically, as nature's kind of done some of the upgrading for us, right?
So the geological and hydrothermal processes have liberated or transported or taken out, leached the nickel from the olivine and reprecipitated it in a sulfide form in that same rock unit, and that's due to the fluids that were passing through that rock.
That exactly, and that fault has been reactivated over time, and it's done the work numerous times, and that is the biggest differentiator, and probably a really good geological exploration model now for these pyridotite dunite bodies. You need to have some structure that goes along with them in order to upgrade your nickel.
And a dunite, if I remember my ignis petrology, a dunite is 90% olivine.
Yeah, that's high olivine.
Yeah.
They're massive ultramafic bodies, right? And the ferpentinization makes the magnetics show quite well as well.
But it's only economic if the nickel is been leached out of the olivine and put into a, what was the word you used, a high tenor sulfide.
Yeah, it's economic in a current sense of what processes are, commercial and are available, right? So in your normal flotation type scenario, ours works. Some of the other lower grade deposits require additional mag separation or such other things that may not be available yet commercially.
So what happens now? So you've published a resource. Has your I haven't checked your stock price in the last half an hour or so since it's opened, but has the market responded well to it?
I would say it's up around 14% on the day, and had a very good spike in volume. So I think we traded over 10 million shares. So I think that's a pretty good sign that the market likes it.
And what next? What happens now? What's happening on the ground? Where are you with your drill rigs? What's happening with the team? Where are you with cash?
Well, we don't have a burn rate to speak of, not a very high. And basically the company is extremely thin on overhead. And so we're not burning a lot of money right now, but we are going to employ a drill on possibly some of the gold extensions, because we may be able to add some ounces very quickly. As far as the nickel goes, we're likely moving to a more of a development pre-feasibility sort of stage, and that we're looking at our options as far as what kind of a team that we require to do that. We think we know some people that are interested already, but we're also going to show the resource and market it, and we'll see what kind of reaction we get from large corporates and whatnot a lot of them who have already expressed an interest, at least to look at it and meet and do their due diligence.
I see that you're an Australian company, which doesn't bring with it a requirement to publish the full technical report on the website. It's simply you have the requirement to publish the summary of the technical report. And I've written enough of those, and I've seen enough of those to know that they often bear no relation to the back of the technical report or the body of the technical report. Are you going to publish your technical report?
I believe we will. I don't see any reason not to. I think we can be quite open as possible, open whole data room, and I really don't see any reason not to publish the full technical report.
When you look at the resource, it seems as if, thanks to the geological homogeneity, there's not a great deal of doubt about the unit and the mineralization. What drill hole spacing do you need for inferred resources?
Well, it's not a hard distance. Each deposit has its own characteristics, right? But for us, we used 100 meters for an indicated and 200 meters for an inferred. And in this kind of deposit, it seems quite reasonable. I think it's been used elsewhere. And our consultants that did the work have a lot of experience in these large, bulky type deposits, nickel, copper, for the most part.
And that is how you can build up a large tonnage with a small amount of drilling, because you don't have to have so many drill holes to cover the same strike length and the same width and depth.
Yeah, it's not like a complex gold deposit, right? There's a lot of confidence on continuity over 100 or 200 meters. When you consider the unit is over 6 kilometers long, and we really didn't put when you look at the model versus sort of what's unclassified and what is classified, I think the unit is likely well above 4 to 6 billion tons.
And it seems that the do I recall rightly that the indicated grade was 0.26% nickel and the inferred was 0.24%, or was it the other way around?
That's about right. It depends on the cutoff grade that you use. I think it's a little higher than what you said, but you can add about a 0.02 to 0.03 cobalt for your nickel equivalent.
Yep.
We've already determined that the cobalt does recover nicely with the nickel. And that makes sense because it's generally going to be in the pentlandite.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just looking up the resource notes. There we go. I've got 1.04 billion tons at 0.27% nickel and 0.04% cobalt. So 0.3% nickel equivalent.
There you go, yeah.
And sorry, the numbers I was quoting were Canada nickel numbers. So they're measured.
That.
Yeah. And so really, I guess the next step is firming up on the metallurgy. And I see that you've got a 12-month program of understanding the metallurgy. Can you just talk me through that? What you know so far and what you are hoping to gain over the next 12 months in terms of knowledge.
Well, what we know, we knew early on that really the question everyone would ask is, what is your nickel hosted in? Great, we found a nickel deposit, but does it recover? And so we used SPX Labs, which is a division of Glencore in Sudbury, and sent various grades, composites through to them with our drill holes. And we found a very, and this is, you got to remember, this is first pass metallurgy, so they just run it through a standard coarse grind flotation, and we found you're getting right off the bat, first pass, 50 to 60 plus % recoveries overall, and 72 out of your flotation. We're producing float cons, so we're producing concentrates of anywhere between 11 and over 20%. So basically the range of the cons that they produce in the first place would go into any commercial smelter, even down the road at Sudbury, which is, a 2.5 hour drive from where we are.
What do they take? Will they take 11% nickel in a concentrate?
Yeah, that's about where they want to be. 11 to 14 is what I understand. But that's a blend for them because they have numerous other mines already feeding their smelters. But I think the one thing to consider is that this deposit is so large, it's likely not just going to be a feeder for another smelter. I think you're probably looking at a con that feeds, directly to a battery plant or something like that.
So talk me through what the next stages of metallurgy you're going to be doing. You're going to be will you be testing out, I don't know, X-ray sorting, XRD sorting and ore sorting or is it all about optimization of the concentration processes through flotation? What have you got planned for this year?
Yeah, I don't think sorting is going to be an issue. I think it looks all pretty standard. So I think we're going to talk about grind sizes, coarsening them up or fine. You got to talk about flocculants, additional reagents, just and slimes do not seem to be a problem. Now you want to knock them out as early as you can with the flocculants, but that's that's fine tuning, and that's metallurgical work. So I think all we're going to do is probably provide more product to the labs of variable grades through the a bigger part of the deposit, and then let them do their work in terms of optimizing, right? in terms of optimizing the grind size and the reagents that are going to be required.
You mentioned that there are a number of regional faults that have altered the geology along your 6.5 kilometers. Does each fault have its own signature, so to speak, of mineralizing styles, or is there some commonality between the faults?
Well, the faults that I'm talking about are running in a roughly northeasterly direction. They seem to be similar in terms of they're deep-seated faults, and they've likely reactivated and provided fluids and alteration over time and so it'll depend on what the host unit, like what of the faults actually intersected, and and then how much sulfide was in the system. And in our case, it seems to be a lot of sulfide in the system, especially when you look up even towards the gold district in the north. There was, hundreds of meters of pyrrhotite bearing rock kind of cutting through our gold deposit.
There was plenty of sulfur available, and the geology of the ultramafic units is relatively homogeneous over the 6.5 kilometers. So
that's yeah.
And do you see kind of a grade variation away from the regional faults? Have you been able to locate those faults and map them?
We've mapped them quite accurately. They show up quite well in even in older geology maps. They were mapped, so they're not a surprise. It's just the fact is that they've helped things along in our case.
Tell me what the year ahead holds for you in terms of kind of what are the main activities that you've got blocked out for the rest of 2023, please.
Well, I think metallurgy is going to be a part of it. I think marketing and basically, deciding to the numerous options that we have in front of us. Fortunately, with Aston, we have large shareholders, the largest, like told our chairman. So we have the stock, in pretty good control. And I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a lot of visits, a lot of site visits, a lot of offers to either, partner or what have you. But the beauty is, I think we hold the cards here. So really, there's going to be a lot of deciding what the best path for the shareholder is here this year.
So in a sense, the bulk of the work of defining the resource has been done, as you've shown today, having defined that resource. And it's such a new entrant into the market that you've effectively described a year of catching up. The market needs to catch up with what you've got and where you're at.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's part of it. It's occurred so quickly from discovery to a resource that, there's some catch up to do. And being ASX listed, it's likely some North American catch up to do, more so than Australian.
The metallurgy, the process that you worked on, or that you described, that basically happens behind closed doors, really. And typically in metallurgical programs, it just kind of enters into a black box and kind of disappears into a laboratory, and then 6 months, 9 months, 12 months later, the guys come out kind of slightly dusty and slightly dizzy in their lab coats and say, "Here are the results."
I don't know if I think SPX is a little quicker than that. I think we'll be able to put out results more on a more continuous basis there. Because it's not complex. Like this isn't, this isn't a new chemistry kit we're dealing with. This is pretty standard nickel-bearing sulfide for them.
That is good to reiterate that point.
Yeah.
Tell me about your shareholder register, and how many shares does Tolga own? Tolga, remind me of the name, his surname.
Komova.
Tolga Komova, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think he's around just under 10%. I don't know exactly the number of shares, but you know, and likely if you include associates and whatnot, it gets into the 20+% range.
Do you have any institutions on the shareholder register?
There's some very good ones. Ruffer, Franklin, to name a few. A couple of good Canadian funds, K2, Extract, Vivid. These are just some of the ones I can recall. But they came in when they raised money back about a year ago. So they understand the business, and I think they're long-term good supportive shareholders.
How much did you raise a year ago?
I think that was around 29 million.
And what can you remember what price that was done at?
I believe it was a charity flow through.
Oh yeah.
So the back end price was around 14 cents, I think.
It's interesting, isn't it? 2022 was a dreadful year for resource companies, particularly explorers, where valuations were crushed. And your company has been through this extraordinary discovery process, and yet you're trading at the same price or slightly lower than when you raised capital a year ago. And the whole point about raising capital in an exploration company is to spend the money to define valuable minerals. You've certainly done that. It's just that the market hasn't seemed to have caught up with the fact that you've got that valuable mineral.
Yeah, I think we were pushed down with everyone else. In May, June last year, but we're on the recovery road. It looks like. I don't think we were pushed down as badly as a lot of companies. But we just, we had the window when we raised the money. I think it was quite timely, and we've used the money well. We now have in hand a gold and a nickel maiden resource, and I think we probably exceeded even our own expectations on both fronts.
Was the gold discovery also relatively recent?
Yeah, the resource was put out about 2 months ago, and yeah, it was interesting because we surprised ourselves. The extensional drilling that we did produced a lot more ounces than we thought. So we were very happy with that. And what that means is we can likely, with not a lot of drilling, add ounces quickly to.
And in your news release, you've described it as being a non-core asset. I think you referred to gold and other non-core assets. You weren't quite explicit describing the gold as non-core, but clearly the big game in town is the nickel.
Yeah, the nickel dwarfs the gold. There's no doubt. But as the nickel enters a different stage, the nickel may dwarfs. Well, it dwarfs our management team in terms of who's going to take it forward. And what we're saying about the gold is it likely will need to be separate from the nickel in order to get value. Like, people are not going to give us value for a gold resource within such a large nickel deposit.
Interesting. Well, thank you very much for that introduction to your asset. It's perhaps because it's an Australian company, perhaps because it's a new discovery, but it's my first awareness of the asset. So it's been fascinating, and I particularly like the understanding about the high tenor nickel sulphide in this deposit, which differentiates it from other, let's call them low grade deposits. It's the hazelwoodite, the millerite, and the pentlandite that make the nickel concentrate clean and simple to extract.
That's exactly right. I think you You nailed it there.
Good. Well, I look forward to you nailing it for the rest of the year. Get out there, get the wear through that shoe leather, and good luck telling the story.
Right on. Thanks very much for having me.